We have in Europe more than 500 gigawatts of renewable resources which are ready to connect but cannot be connected because the grid is not there. Regulations were built to save taxpayers money, not to overinvest. So it's shuffling paper, which is time consuming, it's expensive. This is not fit for the purpose anymore.
Take one. Hitachi.
Hello, I'm Angela Barnes. Welcome to The Big Question. Well, this is the show on Euronews where we speak to some of the most influential leaders in business. And today I'm joined by Andreas Schierenbeck, CEO of Hitachi Energy. Andreas, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, there's been a lot going on, Donald Trump and his executive orders, and he talked about energy. And you have been very vocal about the need for urgent investment in power grids. Let's start with that, because Andreas, can you just explain to us how critical the situation is in Europe and what are the immediate consequences if action isn't taken now?
It's a very good question. It's not only the situation in Europe, it's the same situation in North America and all over the world. We suddenly find ourselves in a situation where we need much more electrical energy than we thought. I think the increase is estimated to be 3 to 4 times higher than the primary energy. And some people call it even the age of electricity coming up, and we have to fulfill the needs. And since we get into the situation a little bit unprepared, now we're struggling with fulfill the needs. So we need to add more generation assets, we need to add more grid, we have to produce the products, and there is a gap.
Well, with that gap, given the first year-long breach of the 1.5 degrees Celsius target and current infrastructure challenges, do you believe it's still possible to meet the Paris Accord goals by 2030 without drastic changes? And of course, Donald Trump's pulling the US out of the Paris Accord. So what do you think? Is it still possible to meet that goal?
I think it's still possible. I was in a podium discussion with a scientist and she explained, look, we have to meet that target over a longer period of time. Missing it once is not good, but it's not the end of the world. So we still have to continue with our efforts. And yes, from that point of view, I think we are a little bit responsible for that. We haven't expanded the grid as necessary. We have in Europe more than 500 gigawatts of renewable resources which are ready to connect but cannot be connected because the grid is not there. So we're in a kind of race.
You've compared the shift as well previously, Andreas, I've seen, from the energy supercycle to the era of electricity, to the rise of the internet in the 1990s. Can you just elaborate on this parallel? And what opportunities and risks do you see for businesses and governments in this transformation?
I think the big opportunity is that now we understand that we have not only add renewables, we have to build the foundations, the grid as well. Otherwise, the whole thing is pointless. What we have to change and where you have to adapt is that we have to become faster. You know, the energy business was in the last 15, 20 years a kind of boring game, slow development. There was time for decisions. Actually, regulations were built to save taxpayers money, not to overinvest. And now we have to change it. We have to work together in collaboration, regulators, industry, customers, everybody, to take decisions faster, because the cost of not doing anything or not being fast enough is, from my point of view, higher than the cost of investing now.
So would you say, just touching there again on regulation, is that one of the biggest obstacles to moving things forward with, for example, the daunting task in expanding grid capacity?
It's definitely one of these things. Grid expansion projects take normally 7 to 8 years, and only 2 to 3 years are really construction. 5 to 6 years is permitting, so it's shuffling paper, which is time consuming, it's expensive, and it's definitely not what it should be. We can do that faster. It was right in a time where we were probably in a different world, but now I think we should sit together and say, look, let's adapt that together to become faster and therefore cheaper.
And that permitting problem, is that unique to Europe? How long does it take, for example, for permits in the US? How does it compare? Is it...
I think it's a global problem. Of course, it's a local problem because regulators are local institutions, but they always were set up in the same set of environment. Prevent taxpayers' money to be overspent, keep it in check. but the situation has changed. If the planning horizon for grid expansion was 10 years and the grid project takes 8 years, you can imagine what happens if you suddenly have just more demand. This is not fit for the purpose anymore.
And let's talk about what Hitachi Energy is doing to drive the energy transition through technological innovation. What role do you see your company playing in overcoming gridlocks and renewable integration challenges?
I think as Hitachi we play multiple roles. First of all, we are investing to expanding our production capacity. We are developing new technology to connecting grids and connecting renewables in a bigger scale and reducing losses there. But as well, it's our task to talk to the stakeholders, to regulators, to our customers, to foster this collaboration, to say, look, we want to achieve your one thing, so let's do it together.
And you've called for unprecedented collaboration between governments, businesses and innovators to do this together. Can you share an example of a successful partnership or project that could serve as a blueprint for scaling grid infrastructure?
It's difficult to point out one example. I think we are working together in that. Just to give you one example from my past, probably where this can work. In my past, I was running a big utility in Germany and they developed an LNG harbour. And I was told just a 40 kilometers high-pressure gas pipeline would take 5 to 7 years to build and get permissions. Then the situation changed, as we all know. The same pipeline was built in 9 months. So you see the potential what we have if we're doing the right things.
And if the necessary investments, Andreas, in grids and renewables are delayed, what would the world look like in 2030? Big question.
Good, big question.
Narrow that down.
I have no idea. I think we are able to mitigate all these things over the time. We will adapt, we will find solutions. We have to look at the installed base as well, because what we have installed we can use better with IT. We can use our assets longer if we're doing predictive maintenance with combining IT and OT, what we are doing as Hitachi, quite successful. So I'm not saying delay the investments, but I'm not a pessimist that we're not solving the problems of the future.
Brilliant. Andreas, thank you so much for speaking to us on The Big Question on Euronews.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of The Big Question. Don't forget you can catch more of our shows on our Euronews YouTube channel and also on the euronews.com website. Just head over to business.
Coming up next time on The Big Question.
Space will be everywhere. We cannot live without space. In 20 years from today, €1 invested in space programs brings about €5 back to the economy.